The morning sun peeked through the windows of JFK International Airport as Mike Tyson made his way through the bustling terminal. Even at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, people couldn't help but notice the former heavyweight boxing champion. Some whispered to each other, others smiled respectfully, and a few brave souls approached him for quick selfies. Mike was used to the attention. After decades in the spotlight, he had learned to move through the world with a kind of steady grace that surprised those who only knew his fierce reputation in the ring. Today he was dressed simply in a black tracksuit and comfortable sneakers, a small gym bag slung over his shoulder and a pair of expensive headphones around his neck. Flight 722 to Los Angeles, now boarding first class and priority passengers, announced a voice over the loudspeaker. Mike checked his boarding pass one more time and nodded to his assistant, a young man who had been working with him for the past 3 years. They had booked these tickets months ago, front row seats in first class for the 5-hour flight to LA, where Mike was scheduled to appear at a charity event for children's hospitals. "Ready, boss?" asked his assistant, gathering their carry-on items. "Always ready," Mike replied with his distinctive voice, a half-smile playing on his lips. They approached the gate, where the airline staff greeted them warmly. The gate agent's eyes widened slightly in recognition, but she maintained her professionalism. "Good morning, Mr. Tyson. We're honored to have you flying with us today," she said, scanning his boarding pass. "You're all set. Have a wonderful flight." Mike thanked her and made his way down the jet bridge. As he stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant at the door gave him a bright smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Tyson. Right this way to your seat." The first-class cabin was spacious and elegant, with just 12 large leather seats arranged in 3 rows. Mike and his assistant were assigned to seats 1A and 1B, the very front row on the left side of the plane. These premium spots offered extra legroom, complete privacy, and the quickest service. Mike settled into his seat by the window, immediately adjusting it to a comfortable position. His assistant took the aisle seat beside him, pulling out a tablet to review the schedule for the upcoming charity event. "Would you like a pre-flight drink, Mr. Tyson?" asked a flight attendant, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Just water, thank you," Mike replied. As other first-class passengers boarded, several nodded respectfully in Mike's direction. He was used to this too, the subtle acknowledgments from people who recognized him but didn't want to intrude. Mike had come a long way from his younger days. At 58, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger. The first-class cabin was almost full when the atmosphere subtly shifted. A group of 3 men in expensive suits boarded, led by a tall, silver-haired man with a commanding presence. They were talking loudly about a business deal, seemingly oblivious to the other passengers. The silver-haired man stopped in the middle of the first-class cabin, frowning as he checked his boarding pass. "This can't be right," he said loudly. "I specifically requested front-row seats." A flight attendant, different from the one who had greeted Mike, quickly approached him. "I apologize for any confusion. Mr. Parker, you and your colleagues are in seats 2A through 2C, right behind the front row." The businessman, Mr. Parker, looked at the front row where Mike and his assistant were seated. His expression darkened slightly. "That won't work," he said dismissively. "I need the front row. I get motion sickness otherwise." The flight attendant looked uncomfortable. "I understand, sir, but those seats are already occupied, as you can see." Parker lowered his voice, but not enough to prevent Mike from hearing. "Can't you move them? Do you know who I am? My company spends millions with this airline every year." The flight attendant hesitated, then nodded. "Let me see what I can do, sir." Mike watched this exchange with mild interest. He'd encountered entitled behavior before and usually chose to ignore it. He returned his attention to his phone, scrolling through messages from his kids. A few minutes later, the same flight attendant approached Mike's seat, leaning down to speak quietly. "Excuse me, Mr. Tyson," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have a situation. One of our very important customers is requesting the front row seats. Would you and your assistant mind moving to row 3? It's still first class, of course." Mike looked up from his phone, genuinely surprised. "We booked these seats months ago," he said calmly. "Yes, I understand," the attendant replied, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "But Mr. Parker is a platinum member and a major corporate client. He's specifically requesting the front row due to motion sickness." Mike's assistant leaned forward. Mr. Tyson also specifically requested front row seats. That's why we booked them so far in advance. And he's also a platinum member. The flight attendant's discomfort was obvious now. Perhaps you could accommodate us just this once. We would be very grateful. Mike studied her face for a moment. There was something in her expression. Not just nervousness, but almost a pleading look. Why is this so important? Mike asked directly. There are other front row seats on the right side of the plane. Why ours specifically? The flight attendant hesitated again. Mr. Parker prefers the left side and... She trailed off. And what? Mike pressed, his voice still calm but firm. Before she could answer, another crew member approached. An older man with a supervisor badge. Is there a problem here? He asked, his tone professional but cool. The flight attendant seemed relieved to have backup. I was just asking if Mr. Tyson would consider moving to accommodate Mr. Parker. The supervisor turned to Mike. Mr. Tyson, we would greatly appreciate your cooperation in this matter. Mr. Parker is one of our most valued customers. Mike's assistant spoke up again. And what does that make Mr. Tyson? He paid for these specific seats months ago. The supervisor's expression hardened slightly. Of course, Mr. Tyson is a valued customer as well. But certain accommodations for certain passengers would be... He paused, searching for the right words. Appreciated by the airline. Mike sat up straighter, something clicking in his mind. Certain passengers? He repeated. What exactly does that mean? An uncomfortable silence followed. Mike glanced past the crew members to where Parker stood watching the exchange, a slight smirk on his face. Around them, other passengers had begun to notice the situation, some openly staring. Let me be clear, Mike said, his voice still quiet, but now carrying an edge of steel. I booked these seats months ago. I paid for them. I'm not moving because someone else wants them. The supervisor's expression tightened. Mr. Tyson, I'm sure you understand the importance of accommodating... Accommodating what? Mike interrupted. Say it clearly. More passengers were watching now. A young woman a few seats back had taken out her phone and appeared to be recording the exchange. The supervisor lowered his voice. Look, we're just trying to avoid any problems. The only problem, Mike replied evenly, is that you're asking me to give up seats I paid for, and I can't help wondering why. Parker chose this moment to approach. Perhaps I can help resolve this situation, he said smoothly. Mr. Tyson, I'm sure you understand that some of us have certain standards of comfort when we travel. I specifically need the front left side of the aircraft. Mike looked at him directly. So do I. That's why I booked it. Parker's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure the airline can make it worth your while. A voucher, perhaps? Or an upgrade on your next flight? Mike shook his head. I don't want a voucher. I want the seats I paid for. Parker's facade slipped slightly. Look, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. I have significant influence with this airline. And I don't think you understand that I'm not moving, Mike replied, his voice still calm but now carrying that unmistakable Tyson intensity that had made champions back down in the ring. The supervisor tried again. Mr. Tyson, perhaps if we... What's your name? Mike asked suddenly. Excuse me? Your name, Mike repeated. And your employee ID number. Both of you, he added, looking at the flight attendant as well. The supervisor hesitated. Richard Thompson, ID number 87429. Mike took out his phone and made a note of it. Then he looked at the flight attendant expectantly. Linda Walsh, she said quietly. ID 92351. Mike nodded and added her information to his note. Then he pulled up his contacts and began scrolling. Who are you calling? The supervisor asked, a note of worry creeping into his voice. My lawyer, Mike replied simply. And then the CEO of this airline. He's an old friend. A new tension filled the air. Parker's confident expression faltered. Another flight attendant, who had been watching from further down the aisle, stepped forward. Excuse me, she said. Can I speak with you, Richard? Her name tag read Teresa. The supervisor looked annoyed but stepped aside with her. Their whispered conversation was intense, with Teresa gesturing emphatically several times. Meanwhile, more passengers had noticed the confrontation. Some had their phones out, recording. Others were whispering among themselves. The entire boarding process had ground to a halt. After a minute, the supervisor returned, his demeanor noticeably changed. Mr. Tyson, please accept our apologies for the confusion. Of course you can keep your assigned seats. Parker looked outraged. This is unacceptable. Do you know how much business my company does with this airline? The supervisor turned to him.
Mr. Parker, we have excellent seats for you in row 2 as originally assigned.
Or if you prefer, there are seats available in row 1 on the right side of the aircraft. This isn't over, Parker said, his voice low but angry. Not by a long shot. As Parker moved away to take his assigned seat, visibly fuming, Mike put his phone down and took a deep breath. His assistant leaned over. You okay, boss? Mike nodded slowly. I'm fine, but I'm still making that call once we're in the air. The remaining passengers boarded in relative silence, the earlier tension still hanging over the first-class cabin. Just before the doors closed, Mike noticed Teresa, the flight attendant who had intervened, giving him a small, approving nod from her position near the galley. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, and as the safety demonstration began, Mike closed his eyes for a moment. This trip to Los Angeles had just gotten a lot more complicated than he'd expected. But one thing was certain. This wasn't an incident he was going to let slide. Not this time. The plane had been in the air for 20 minutes, but the tension in the first-class cabin hadn't eased. Mike sat quietly by the window, looking out at the clouds below. His assistant was typing furiously on his tablet, documenting everything that had happened at boarding. Got it all down? Mike asked, his voice low. Every word, his assistant nodded. The whole thing stinks, boss, Mike agreed silently. In his younger days, he might have lost his temper, might have made a scene. But years of personal growth had taught him that staying calm in moments like these was more powerful than any outburst. A different flight attendant approached, Teresa, the one who had spoken up earlier. She leaned down slightly. Can I get you anything, Mr. Tyson? She asked, her voice professional but with a hint of warmth that had been missing from the other crew members. Coffee would be great, Mike replied. Black. Of course. She hesitated, then added quietly, I want to apologize for what happened earlier. That's not what our airline stands for. Mike studied her face. Unlike the others, her expression was open, her eyes meeting his directly. Thank you, he said simply. I appreciate that. As Teresa moved away, Mike took out his phone and switched it to airplane mode. He opened the voice recorder app and quietly narrated the events that had just transpired, capturing every detail while it was still fresh in his mind. His memory had always been sharp, a necessity in the boxing ring, and he recalled the exact words and expressions of everyone involved. 2 rows behind him, Parker and his associates were talking loudly about a business deal, occasionally throwing glances toward Mike. Their conversation was just loud enough to be intrusive, but not quite loud enough to complain about. Mike ignored them, continuing his voice recording. The supervisor, Richard Thompson, specifically used the phrase certain accommodations for certain passengers. When pressed to explain what he meant, he refused to clarify. A soft chime indicated an announcement from the captain. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some light turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The seatbelt sign illuminated and Teresa made her way back through the cabin, checking that everyone was secure. As she passed Parker's row, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. When will drink service begin? He demanded. I've been waiting for 15 minutes. Teresa gently but firmly removed his hand from her wrist. Sir, we need to remain seated during turbulence. I'll bring your drink as soon as the captain turns off the seatbelt sign, Parker scoffed. I pay too much for this kind of service. Get me your supervisor. The supervisor is currently in the main cabin, Teresa replied calmly. I'll ask him to speak with you once it's safe to move about the cabin again. Unbelievable, Parker muttered loudly. First the seats, now this. Mike had watched this exchange in the reflection of his window. He noticed how Teresa maintained her composure despite Parker's rudeness. When she passed his row again, he gave her a small nod of respect, which she returned with a subtle smile. The turbulence lasted only a few minutes. Once the seatbelt sign turned off, Teresa began the drink service starting from the front of the cabin, which of course meant Mike was served first. This seemed to irritate Parker even further. Richard, the supervisor, eventually appeared in the first-class cabin. He spoke briefly with Teresa, then approached Parker's row. You wanted to see me, sir? He asked, his tone deferential. This service is unacceptable, Parker said, not bothering to lower his voice. First the seat situation, and now waiting forever for a simple drink. I apologize for any inconvenience, sir. The turbulence— I don't care about the turbulence, Parker interrupted. I care about getting the service I paid for. And speaking of paying, I still don't understand why he gets priority. He nodded toward Mike. Richard looked uncomfortable again. Mr. Parker, as I explained, those passengers had reserved those specific seats in advance. And I told you I needed those seats, Parker insisted. My company books hundreds of flights with your airline every year. You should know how to treat your premium customers. The phrase caught Mike's attention. Premium customers. There it was again. The implication that some passengers deserved special treatment based on— What exactly? Mike turned slightly in his seat to better observe the conversation. Other passengers were watching too, the entertainment value of the confrontation apparently outweighing their discomfort at the tension. Sir, I assure you, we value your business, Richard was saying. But we also have to respect the reservations of all our passengers. Parker leaned forward. Let's be honest here. We both know what's going on. Some people just don't know their place anymore. A sudden silence fell over the first-class cabin. The comment hung in the air, its implication impossible to miss. Even Parker's associates looked uncomfortable, one of them shifting awkwardly in his seat. Mike felt a familiar heat rising in his chest, the old anger that had fueled him in the ring. He took a deep breath, then another. When he had himself under control, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. At 6 feet, Mike Tyson still had a powerful presence. He didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. He simply turned and faced Parker directly. What exactly do you mean by some people don't know their place? Mike asked, his voice measured but carrying throughout the quiet cabin. Parker blanched slightly but tried to maintain his composure. This isn't about you specifically. It's about respect for status. Status, Mike repeated. And what determines someone's status in your eyes? Parker glanced at Richard, perhaps expecting support, but the supervisor was suddenly very interested in adjusting his tie. Success, Parker said finally. Achievement. Position in society. Mike nodded slowly. I see, and you've decided I don't have those things? I didn't say that, Parker backpedaled. Look, this has gotten blown out of proportion. All I wanted was the seat I felt I deserved. The seat you felt you deserved, Mike echoed. Not the seat you paid for or reserved, but the one you felt entitled to, even though someone else had already claimed it. Several passengers had their phones out now, recording the exchange. Mike was aware of this but didn't care. Some things needed to be said in the open. My place, Mike continued, is exactly where I choose to be. And today that's seat 1A, which I booked months ago. He turned to Richard. I'd like to speak to the lead flight attendant, please. Richard hesitated. Mr. Tyson, I assure you, the lead flight attendant, Mike repeated firmly. A moment later, an older woman with short gray hair and a senior crew badge appeared. Her name tag read Gloria. I'm the purser on this flight, she said. How can I help you, sir? Mike gestured to his phone. I'd like to file a formal complaint about the treatment I received during boarding and about the comments just made by this passenger. I've recorded everything that's happened so far. Gloria glanced at Richard, whose face had gone pale. Of course, sir, she said. We take such matters very seriously. I'll bring you the necessary forms. Parker stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm a platinum member with over 1 million miles on this airline. So am I, Mike replied calmly. Funny how that didn't seem to matter earlier. Gloria looked between the two men. Gentlemen, please return to your seats. This is an aircraft, not a debate hall. Mike nodded respectfully to Gloria and sat down. Parker remained standing for a moment longer, then sat with a huff of frustration. Teresa approached with a small stack of forms for Mike. Here you are, Mr. Tyson. If you need any help filling these out, just let me know. As Mike began documenting the incident, his assistant leaned over. Don't forget to mention how they tried to move us despite our advance booking. I won't, Mike assured him. Then lowering his voice, he added, and I'm still making that call when we land. The rest of the flight proceeded in an uneasy pace. Parker and his associates spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward Mike. Other passengers in first class seemed to have chosen sides, some giving Mike supportive nods, others carefully avoiding eye contact. About an hour before landing, Mike noticed Teresa in a serious conversation with Gloria near the galley. They both looked concerned, and at one point Gloria took notes on a small pad. Mike suspected Teresa was giving her own account of what had happened. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Mike's assistant showed him something on his tablet. Several social media posts about the incident were already going viral, with headlines like "Mike Tyson stands up to airline discrimination" and "Boxing legend refuses to give up seat to entitled businessman." Mike wasn't surprised. In today's world, nothing stayed private for long. He just hoped the videos captured the truth of what had happened. The plane touched down at LAX right on schedule. As they taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles, where the local time is 10:42 a.m. and the temperature is a pleasant 75 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." Then, unexpectedly, he added, "Would passenger Michael Tyson please remain on board after we arrive at the gate? We have representatives from our customer service team who would like to speak with you." Mike exchanged glances with his assistant. This was unusual. As the other passengers began to disembark, Mike noticed that Parker and his associates were being escorted off first by two uniformed airline staff who hadn't been on the flight. Their expressions were serious, and Parker no longer looked quite so confident. "Mr. Tyson," Gloria approached once most passengers had left. "Thank you for your patience. Our regional customer service director is waiting to speak with you in the terminal. Teresa will escort you." Mike nodded and gathered his things. As he walked toward the exit, several crew members nodded respectfully to him. One whispered, "Thank you." At the aircraft door, Teresa spoke quietly. "What happened today wasn't right, Mr. Tyson. Some of us have seen this before with certain crew members, but nobody ever stands up to them." "Well," Mike said with a slight smile, "standing up is something I've always been good at." As they walked up the jet bridge, Mike took out his phone again. He had several calls to make, to his lawyer, to the airline CEO, and to his publicist. What had started as a simple trip to a charity event had turned into something much bigger. But sometimes, he reflected, that's how change happens. One person refuses to move, and suddenly everything else has to. Teresa led Mike through the busy terminal toward a door marked "Airline Staff Only." His assistant followed closely behind, still documenting everything on his tablet. As they walked, Mike noticed people pointing and whispering. News traveled fast these days. "Right through here, Mr. Tyson," Teresa said, holding the door open. The room beyond was a comfortable office with several armchairs and a small conference table. A man in his early 50s stood as they entered. He wore an expensive suit with the airline's logo pin on his lapel. "Mr. Tyson, I'm William Chen, Regional Director of Customer Experience," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us." Mike shook his hand. "Didn't realize I had a choice." Chen smiled apologetically. "Of course you did. We can't force you to do anything. We're just grateful for the opportunity to address what happened." "And what exactly did happen in your view?" Mike asked, taking a seat in one of the armchairs. His assistant sat nearby, tablet at the ready. Chen's expression turned serious. "Based on the initial reports, it appears you were asked to give up your reserved seats to accommodate another passenger. This goes against our policies and values as an airline." "It goes against more than just your policies," Mike said quietly. Chen nodded. "I understand. And I want to assure you that we take this matter extremely seriously. Teresa has given us her account, and we've already begun interviewing the other crew members involved." Mike studied the man's face, looking for signs of insincerity. He'd dealt with enough corporate types over the years to recognize when someone was just trying to smooth things over. But Chen seemed genuinely concerned. "I appreciate that," Mike said. "But I still need to make a call." Chen looked curious. "May I ask who you're calling?" "James Wilson." The name had an immediate effect. Chen's eyes widened slightly. "Our Chief Operations Officer?" Mike nodded. "We've known each other for years. He asked for my help with your diversity initiatives last year, remember? The TV spots I did about treating everyone with respect?" Chen definitely remembered. Those commercials had been part of a major campaign after the airline had faced previous accusations of discriminatory treatment. "Of course," Chen said. "Would you like some privacy for your call?" "No need," Mike replied, taking out his phone. "This concerns all of us." He scrolled through his contacts and found Wilson's number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Mike, how are you? Aren't you supposed to be in the air right now?" "Just landed in LA, James," Mike replied. "But we need to talk." Something in his tone must have alerted Wilson. What happened? Mike recounted the events of the past few hours, the attempt to move him from his seats, the supervisor's comments about certain passengers, Parker's behavior, and the recording of the entire incident. As he spoke, Chen's expression grew increasingly troubled. Teresa, who had remained by the door, looked down at her shoes. Mike, I don't even know what to say. Wilson's voice came through the speaker. This is absolutely unacceptable. I thought you'd feel that way, Mike said. Especially after all that talk about changing the culture at the airline. Where are you now? Wilson asked. In a meeting room with your regional director, William Chen, and the flight attendant who stood up for me, Teresa. There was a brief pause. Put Chen on, please. Mike handed the phone to Chen, who took it with a slightly nervous expression. Yes, sir? Mike couldn't hear Wilson's words, but judging by Chen's face, they were direct and serious. Chen mostly listened, occasionally saying yes, sir, or I understand, sir. At one point, he glanced at Teresa and gave her a small nod of approval. After about 2 minutes, Chen handed the phone back to Mike. Mike, I'm personally handling this from here, Wilson said. I've already contacted our HR department and legal team. We'll need your full statement, and any recordings or evidence you have. You'll have it, Mike assured him. But James, this isn't just about me. I can handle myself. What about the people who don't have my resources or connections? What about the ones who just accept this kind of treatment because they don't think they can fight back? You're right, Wilson acknowledged. And that's exactly why we need to take decisive action here. This isn't just about one incident, it's about making sure our entire company lives up to the values we claim to have. Mike appreciated the sentiment, but he'd heard similar promises before. Actions, not words, James, that's all I'm asking for. You'll have both, Wilson promised. And Mike? Thank you for calling me directly. A lot of people would have just gone straight to social media or their lawyers. Don't worry, they're next on my list, Mike said, though his tone had lightened slightly. But I wanted to give you a chance to do the right thing first. After ending the call, Mike turned to Chen. So what happens now? Chen straightened his shoulders. Mr. Wilson has instructed me to conduct a full investigation immediately. He's also sending a corporate team from headquarters. In the meantime, the crew members involved have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. Including Richard and Linda? Mike asked, referring to the supervisor and flight attendant who had tried to move him. Yes, effective immediately, Chen confirmed, and Mr. Wilson asked me to extend his personal apology, along with an offer to cover all your expenses while in Los Angeles. Mike shook his head. I don't want free stuff. I want real change. Understood, Chen nodded. Teresa, would you mind giving us the room for a few minutes? I need to take Mr. Tyson's official statement. Teresa nodded and moved toward the door, but Mike stopped her. Actually, I'd like her to stay. She's a witness to what happened. Chen agreed, and for the next 30 minutes, Mike gave a detailed account of the incident, with Teresa occasionally adding her own observations. His assistant recorded everything, creating a backup of the official statement. As they were finishing, Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it with raised eyebrows. It seems the videos from the flight have already gone viral, he said. Our public relations team is being flooded with inquiries. Mike wasn't surprised. The truth comes out one way or another these days. Chen nodded grimly. Mr. Tyson, on behalf of the airline, I want to apologize again for what happened. This isn't who we are, but it is, Mike interrupted gently. At least it's who some of your people are. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Chen could answer, there was a knock at the door. A young woman in an airline uniform peeked in. Excuse me, Mr. Chen, but there's a situation in the terminal. The passenger from Mr. Tyson's flight, Mr. Parker, is causing a scene at the customer service desk. He's demanding compensation for what he's calling disrespectful treatment. Chen closed his eyes briefly, as if summoning patience. I'll handle it. Please escort Mr. Tyson and his assistant to the VIP lounge where they can wait in peace. Mike stood. Actually, I have a charity event to get to. My car should be waiting. Of course, Chen said. Teresa, would you please make sure Mr. Tyson gets to his car without any further interruptions? Teresa nodded. Happily, sir. As they walked through the terminal, Mike could see a commotion near the customer service desk. Parker was gesturing wildly, his face red with anger. Several airline staff were trying to calm him down without much success. Quite a performance, Mike's assistant muttered. Some people just can't handle not getting their way, Teresa said quietly. They exited through a side door, avoiding the main terminal crowds. Outside, a black SUV was waiting as arranged. The driver, a young man in a suit, jumped out to open the door for Mike. All set, Mr. Tyson? The Children's Hospital is expecting you in about 40 minutes. Mike nodded, then turned to Teresa. Thank you for doing the right thing today. Not everyone would have, Teresa smiled. My grandmother always told me that staying silent when you see something wrong is the same as saying it's okay. I couldn't do that. Mike reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever need anything, a reference, a connection, whatever, call this number. My personal assistant will put you through to me. Teresa looked surprised but took the card gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Tyson. Just Mike, he said with a smile. And thank you. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Mike's assistant was scrolling through his phone. Boss, this thing is blowing up online. The videos from the plane have millions of views already. Mike leaned back in his seat. Call Diane, he said, referring to his publicist. Tell her I'll need a statement prepared, but I want to keep it simple. This isn't about me. It's about a bigger problem that needs fixing. His assistant nodded and made the call, speaking quietly into his phone. Mike stared out the window at the passing Los Angeles streets. The charity event today was for a children's hospital, where kids were fighting battles much bigger than anything he'd faced on a plane. That put things in perspective. Still, some fights needed to be fought even if they seemed small in comparison, because small injustices left unchallenged became big ones. Mike had learned that lesson long ago, both in and out of the ring. His phone buzzed with a text message from Wilson. Executive team meeting emergency session tonight. We'll call you after with details of our response. Thank you for holding us accountable. Mike put his phone away without responding. Words were easy. He'd wait to see what actions followed. For now he had kids to visit, hopes to lift, spirits to encourage. The other battle, the one that had started unexpectedly on a morning flight, would continue without him for a few hours. But it wouldn't be forgotten. Not by the airline, not by the people watching online, and certainly not by Mike Tyson. Some stands were worth taking, no matter how uncomfortable they made people feel. And sometimes one person refusing to move was exactly what was needed to move everyone else forward. The Children's Hospital was a welcome change of pace. For 3 hours, Mike forgot about airline drama and focused on kids who lit up when they saw him. He signed autographs, took photos, and even demonstrated a few light boxing moves for the ones well enough to get out of bed. These moments, seeing hope in young eyes, always grounded him. By the time he left, the sun was setting over Los Angeles. His assistant was waiting by the car, phone in hand as usual. How'd it go? He asked as Mike approached. Good, Mike said simply. Those kids are fighters. His assistant nodded, then held up his phone. The airline situation has gotten bigger. All major news networks are covering it now. Mike wasn't surprised. What are they saying? Mostly supportive of you. The videos make it pretty clear what happened. He scrolled through his phone. The airline released a statement about an hour ago. Want to hear it? Mike nodded as they got into the car. We are aware of an incident involving passenger treatment on Flight 722 this morning. We take these matters extremely seriously and have launched a full investigation. The employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. We are in direct contact with Mr. Tyson and deeply regret any distress caused. This behavior does not reflect our values as an airline. Standard corporate response, Mike observed. There's more, his assistant continued. James Wilson, the COO, has called 3 times while you were with the kids. He says it's urgent. Mike checked his watch. It was just after 6 p.m. Let's head to the hotel first. I'll call him from there. The drive to the hotel took longer than expected due to LA traffic. By the time they arrived, it was nearly 7:30. As they walked through the lobby, the hotel manager hurried over. Mr. Tyson, welcome to our hotel. We've upgraded you to our presidential suite at no extra charge. Mike looked at his assistant, who shrugged. I didn't ask for an upgrade. It's complimentary, the manager insisted. We're honored to have you stay with us. Is this because of what happened on the plane? Mike asked directly. The manager hesitated. We'd heard about the incident. This is simply our way of showing appreciation for a distinguished guest. Mike shook his head. I appreciate the thought, but I'll keep the room I booked. I don't need special treatment. The manager looked surprised but recovered quickly. Of course, sir. Whatever you prefer. In the elevator, his assistant gave him a questioning look. You turned down a presidential suite? This isn't about getting perks, Mike replied. It's about being treated fairly, just like everyone else. Once settled in his room, a perfectly nice standard suite, Mike called Wilson back. The CO answered immediately. Mike, thank you for calling. It's been quite a day. You could say that, Mike agreed. Your statement was a bit generic, Wilson sighed. The lawyers insisted on keeping it simple until we had all the facts. But that's why I've been trying to reach you. The investigation is moving quickly and some disturbing patterns are emerging. Mike sat on the edge of the bed. What kind of patterns? After your call, I ordered a review of all complaints filed against the LAX-based crews over the past year. We found multiple incidents involving the same team that was on your flight today. Most were never properly addressed. I'm not surprised, Mike said. People like Richard don't suddenly start behaving that way. Exactly, Wilson confirmed. And it gets worse. Teresa has given us a detailed statement. She claims that certain supervisors, including Richard, have an unofficial policy of passenger prioritization based on criteria that would violate every anti-discrimination law in the books. Mike felt a mix of vindication and anger. So I wasn't imagining things. Far from it, Wilson said grimly. We've interviewed 3 other flight attendants who've worked with this team, and they've corroborated Teresa's account. One of them saved text messages from Richard instructing crew to give preferential treatment to certain types of passengers, even if it meant inconveniencing others. Types of passengers, Mike repeated. Let me guess, white, wealthy-looking businessmen? That's exactly it, Wilson confirmed. The text specifically mentioned traditional executive types as deserving extra attention and accommodation. Mike closed his eyes briefly. In 2025, some things hadn't changed as much as people like to pretend. What happens now? He asked. Our legal team is meeting as we speak, Wilson explained. The company's liability is significant, but more importantly, this goes against everything I've been trying to build here. When I brought you in for those diversity commercials last year, it wasn't just a PR stunt for me, Mike. I genuinely want this airline to do better. Actions, not words. Mike reminded him. Exactly, which is why I've already decided that everyone directly involved will be terminated, effective immediately. The regional manager who oversees that team will also be let go. He either knew and ignored it or should have known. Either way, he failed. Mike was surprised by the decisive response. That's more than I expected. It's the bare minimum of what's needed, Wilson insisted. We're also bringing in an independent firm to audit our practices and provide additional training across the entire company. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Mike's assistant went to answer it. Hold on, James, Mike said, then covered the phone. Who is it? His assistant returned with a puzzled expression. It's Teresa, the flight attendant from the plane. She says she needs to talk to you. Mike was surprised. Tell her I'll be right there. Into the phone, he said. James, I need to go. The flight attendant who helped me is here. Teresa? Wilson sounded concerned. That's unusual. Let me know what she says. And Mike, thank you again for bringing this to my attention directly. A lot of people would have just gone straight to the press or their lawyers. Don't thank me yet, Mike replied. Let's see how this plays out. He ended the call and went to the door. Teresa stood in the hallway, still in her airline uniform but looking tired and anxious. I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Tyson, she said, but I didn't know who else to talk to. Come in, Mike offered, stepping aside. And it's still just Mike. Teresa entered the room hesitantly. Mike's assistant offered her a seat and a bottle of water, which she accepted gratefully. What's going on? Mike asked, sitting across from her. After you left the airport, things got crazy, she explained. Mr. Chen interviewed all the crew members individually. When he got to me, I told him everything. Not just about today, but about all the other incidents I've seen over the past 2 years. Mike nodded encouragingly. Then HR called me in, Teresa continued. They had me go through it all again, this time recording my statement. They showed me text messages from Richard to other crew members, messages I'd never seen before. She shook her head in disbelief. They were horrible. Explicit instructions about which passengers to favor based on how they looked or dressed. And you didn't know about these messages? Mike asked. No, Teresa insisted. I noticed patterns in how certain passengers were treated, which is why I spoke up today. But I had no idea it was so organized. Mike believed her. Her distress seemed genuine. After my HR interview, Richard confronted me in the staff area. She continued. He said I'd betrayed the team and that I'd regret it. He knows people in management across several airlines. He implied he could make sure I never work as a flight attendant again. Mike frowned. That sounds like a threat. It was, Teresa agreed. I reported it to HR immediately, but I'm still worried. This job is my livelihood. I'm a single parent with 2 kids. Mike understood her concern. Standing up for what's right often came with risks, a reality he knew all too well. Did you tell Wilson about this? He asked. Teresa looked surprised. The COO? No, I've never even met him. Mike made a decision. Give me a minute. He picked up his phone and called Wilson back. James, I'm with Teresa now. She's being threatened by Richard for speaking up. He put the call on speaker and nodded for Teresa to explain the situation. When she finished, Wilson's voice was tight with anger. Ms. Alvarez, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I want to personally assure you that your job is secure. In fact, I'd like to offer you a position on our new passenger advocacy team once it's established. Teresa looked stunned. Thank you, sir. No, thank you for your integrity, Wilson replied. We need more people like you, not fewer. As for Richard, his threatening behavior will be added to the termination documents, and I promise you he won't be in a position to carry out any threats. After the call ended, Teresa looked both relieved and overwhelmed. I never expected this to happen when I woke up this morning. Neither did I, Mike admitted. But sometimes the right moment finds you, not the other way around. Teresa nodded thoughtfully. I should go. My kids are with a neighbor and I've imposed on your time enough. She stood to leave, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. How do you do it? Stand up to people without seeming afraid, even when the consequences could be serious? Mike considered the question. I spent years being afraid of the wrong things and people. Eventually, I realized that living with yourself after staying silent is harder than facing whatever comes from speaking up. He smiled slightly. Besides, fear and courage can exist at the same time. The trick is not letting the fear make your decisions for you. Teresa seemed to absorb this. Thank you. For everything. After she left, Mike's assistant, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Wilson's really taking this seriously. He knows he has to. Mike replied. The videos are everywhere. If he doesn't act decisively, the company's reputation will suffer even more. Cynical view, his assistant noted. Mike shrugged. Maybe. But sometimes the right thing happens for mixed reasons. I'll take it either way. His phone buzzed with an email notification. Wilson had sent him a draft of the company's new, stronger statement that would be released in the morning, along with the announcement of the terminations. The message was clear and direct, acknowledging the discrimination that had occurred and outlining specific steps to address it. Mike forwarded it to his lawyer for review, then lay back on the hotel bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the day. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more attention, more decisions. But for now, he had done what needed to be done. He had held his ground, spoken his truth, and set consequences in motion. Some fights happened in the ring with gloves and rules and referees. Others happened in everyday moments when someone decided that enough was enough. Both kinds mattered. Both kinds changed things. Mike woke early the next morning, his body still on East Coast time despite the California sunshine streaming through the hotel curtains. He checked his phone, 5:47 a.m. local time, and noticed dozens of notifications. News alerts, text messages, emails, social media mentions. The story had exploded overnight. His assistant had sent him a message. Airline's official statement going public at 8 a.m. their time. Wilson wants to talk before that. Coffee? Mike texted back a simple yes and headed for the shower. By the time he was dressed, there was a knock at the door. His assistant entered with 2 coffee cups and a tablet. Morning, boss. You're trending on every platform. Mike took the coffee. Not what I was aiming for. Sometimes you find the moment. Sometimes the moment finds you, his assistant replied, echoing Mike's words from the day before. Wilson's scheduled to call in 15 minutes. Want to see what people are saying online? Mike nodded, and his assistant handed him the tablet. The story had taken on a life of its own. Most of the coverage was supportive, focusing on how Mike had stood his ground with dignity against clear discrimination. Video clips from the plane had been viewed tens of millions of times. The airline was facing intense scrutiny, with people sharing their own stories of similar treatment. But there was a darker side too. Parker had been identified as Clayton Parker, CEO of a mid-sized tech company. His social media accounts had been set to private, and his company's pages were flooded with negative comments. Some of the responses had crossed the line into threats and harassment. Mike frowned. "This is getting out of hand. The internet mob," his assistant agreed. "Once they sink their teeth in, they don't let go." Mike's phone rang. Wilson calling right on schedule. "Morning, Mike. I'm guessing you've seen the coverage?" "Some of it," Mike confirmed. "Things are escalating quickly." "That's putting it mildly," Wilson said. "Our call centers are overwhelmed. Social media is on fire. We've had to bring in extra security at our headquarters because of the threats." "Threats?" "Nothing credible so far, but people are angry. And not just at us. Parker's company has shut down their offices today as a precaution." Mike shook his head. "That's not what I wanted." "I know," Wilson assured him, "which is why I wanted to talk before we release our statement. We're announcing the terminations this morning. Richard, Linda, 2 other flight attendants who were involved in the discriminatory practices, and their regional manager. The entire team," Mike noted, understanding the full meaning of the decision. "Yes. The evidence was overwhelming once we started digging. This wasn't an isolated incident or a few bad apples. This was a systematic practice that the regional manager either encouraged or willfully ignored." Mike was silent for a moment, taking it in. "What happens to Teresa?" "She's been offered a promotion to our new passenger advocacy team, as I mentioned yesterday. We're creating this team specifically to address concerns about equal treatment. We'd like you to serve as an advisor during its formation if you're willing." Mike hadn't expected that. "An advisor? Your perspective would be valuable," Wilson explained. "And frankly, having your name associated with the initiative would lend it credibility. People need to know we're serious about change." "I'll think about it," Mike said, non-committal. "What else is in the statement?" "A full apology to you, of course. Acknowledgement of the broader issue of discrimination in customer service. Details of the terminations without naming individuals. And the announcement of a company-wide audit and training program." It sounded comprehensive. But Mike had seen companies make big promises before, only to quietly return to business as usual once the spotlight moved on. "Words are easy." "James, I know," Wilson acknowledged. "That's why we're backing it up with immediate action. The terminations are effective today. The audit begins next week, and we've already contracted with a respected civil rights organization to help redesign our training." Mike appreciated the swift response. "What about Parker?" Wilson sighed. "That's trickier. He's not our employee. We've banned him from our airline, but that's the extent of our authority. His company's board is meeting today to discuss the situation. The public pressure is intense." Mike's assistant handed him a note. "Press conference in LA in 30 minutes. Parker apologizing publicly." "Looks like Parker's about to make a statement," Mike told Wilson. "His company must be feeling the heat. Not surprising. The videos make him look terrible, which, to be fair, he was. But Mike, I'm concerned about the level of vitriol directed at him. It's out of proportion," Mike understood. As someone who had been both villain and hero in the public eye, he knew how quickly the court of public opinion could turn into a mob. "I'll make a statement too," he decided. "Ask people to back off the threats and harassment. That's not what this is about." "Thank you," Wilson said, sounding relieved. "We don't want anyone getting hurt over this." After the call ended, Mike's assistant looked at him curiously. "You're going to defend Parker? After what he did?" "Not defend him," Mike clarified. "Just try to keep things in perspective. The man said awful things and should face consequences, but not threats to his safety. Justice, not revenge." His assistant nodded slowly. "You've changed, boss." Mike smiled slightly. "We all should, given enough time." They turned on the hotel TV to watch Parker's press conference. The tech CEO looked haggard, his usual confidence replaced by visible discomfort as he faced the cameras. He read from a prepared statement, apologizing for his regrettable behavior and announcing a leave of absence from his company to reflect and grow. The performance seemed rehearsed and somewhat hollow, clearly crafted by crisis management experts. Mike's assistant snorted. "Not exactly a heartfelt apology." "He's scared," Mike observed. "Fear rarely brings out the best in people." Mike's phone. Buzzed with a text from his publicist. Media requests pouring in. Top morning shows want you. What's our response? He considered for a moment, then replied, "One statement, my terms. No interviews yet." 20 minutes later, his publicist had arranged for him to make a brief statement outside the hotel. No questions, just a chance to address the situation directly. As Mike stepped in front of the gathered reporters and cameras, he felt a familiar calm, the same focus he'd once brought to the ring. The flashing cameras didn't faze him. The shouted questions washed over him like background noise. He spoke without notes, keeping his message simple and direct. "Yesterday, I experienced something that too many people face every day, being treated differently because of how I look. I stood my ground because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted attention or special treatment. The airline has taken responsibility and decisive action, which I appreciate. But this isn't just about one incident or one company. It's about the choices we all make every day. To speak up or stay silent, to treat people fairly or to judge them based on appearances. I've seen the threats being made online against the people involved. That needs to stop. Justice isn't served through harassment or violence. I'm asking everyone to keep this in perspective. Let the proper processes work. To the airline, I say this. Your words of commitment are a good start, but lasting change comes through consistent action over time. I'll be watching to make sure this moment leads to real improvement, not just temporary damage control. And to everyone who's ever been made to feel less than, or asked to give up your seat or told to know your place, stand your ground. Do it with dignity. Do it with calm, but do it. Because sometimes that's how change begins." With that, he stepped away from the microphones, ignoring the flurry of questions that followed. His assistant guided him back inside as his publicist handled the press. Back in his hotel room, Mike checked his messages. Wilson had sent him the final statement from the airline, now public. The terminations were official. The audit was underway. The passenger advocacy team was being formed with Teresa as one of its leaders. Another message arrived, from Teresa herself. "Thank you for standing up. Not just for yourself, but for all of us who've seen this happen and felt powerless to stop it." Mike smiled at that. No one was truly powerless, though sometimes it took a reminder to see the strength you already had. His phone rang again. His lawyer this time. "Mike, the airline's lawyers just called. They want to discuss a settlement." "I'm not interested in their money," Mike replied. "It's not just money," his lawyer explained. "They're proposing something different. Instead of a personal payment to you, they want to establish a foundation focused on equal treatment and customer service across all industries. They'd like you to help direct it." That was unexpected. "A foundation? With significant funding and real authority to investigate complaints and push for industry-wide standards." Mike considered the proposal. It went beyond the usual corporate damage control. It had potential for lasting impact. "Tell them I'm interested in hearing more." After hanging up, Mike stood by the hotel window, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. The charity event, his original reason for coming to LA, was scheduled for this afternoon. Kids who were fighting real battles, much tougher than anything he'd faced on that plane. Yet the small battles mattered too. The moments when someone said enough and refused to accept unfair treatment, those moments added up, changed minds, shifted what people considered acceptable. One incident, one stand, one call, and the ripples spread outward in ways no one could fully predict. Mike Tyson had been many things in his life: champion, villain, comeback story, entertainer, businessman. Today, he was simply a man who had refused to move when he was supposed to. Sometimes that was enough to change more than just a seating arrangement. His assistant knocked on the door. "Car's ready whenever you are. The kids at the hospital are pretty excited you're coming back today." Mike nodded. "Tell them I'm on my way." The airline drama would continue to unfold. The media cycle would eventually move on to the next outrage. But the changes set in motion, both within the company and in the wider conversation, would remain. And that, Mike reflected as he gathered his things, was worth far more than a front row seat on any airplane.